Yeah. So, Mr. Janardhanan, I think you hit the nail on the head with the last question and this question when you spoke about the liquidity issue in MSME space and what Mr. Mukesh very rightly pointed out are the challenges being faced by the SMEs. Representing the polymer segment, before I come to your point on the innovation aspect, which requires a lot of capital, if you see the MSME sector in the polymer segment in the MSME sector, in the last 1.5 years, we have probably seen more volatility than probably the last decade. Our raw material prices for most of the commodity polymers have increased 20 to 50%. In many engineering polymers, up to 100% increase in raw material prices. This apart, we are all aware of the delays due to shipment delays, container shortages, increase in transport costs, both locally and sea freight. And this has added on to a lot of stress for MSMEs in the current times. Now, when a large or a mid-market client, goes to a bank and tries to get his funding, the banks always look at his cash flows and also the collateral. Now, what's happening with a lot of the MSMEs, and having spoken and interacted with a lot of them, when we MSMEs go to the banks, it is primarily collateral driven, more collateral driven than cash flow driven. And this is where the last 1.5 years has hit us. Because if you see the increase in the raw material prices, the bank support has just not been there. And, I think this is one of the key reasons for the liquidity shortages in the last 1.5 years, especially. If you look at foreign countries also, a lot of the financing to large companies and even to small companies is based on the cash flow based financing, bill discounting, factoring, reverse factoring, POS based factoring, POS based receivables. So based on that, we get our funding in other countries. But in India, it's largely collateral based. However, there have been changes in the last couple of years. Without taking too much time, I would like to mention about platforms such as TRADE, which is a trade receivable discounting system, which has been available. There are 3 TRADE platforms which have now been available to MSMEs to be able to discount their receivables and get payments upfront. And this has been a great success story. However, the utilization from the large companies is low. The government and the MSMEs need to push their buyers to get onto this platform and avail this kind of a collateral-free funding for MSMEs. The government has recently also passed a factoring amendment bill, which will enable a lot of NBFCs to be part of these TRADES platforms. And I think that will open up a whole host of funding opportunities for MSMEs. I think with all these changes, as Mr. Mukesh pointed out, and also the previous speakers pointed out, the government also needs to do a little bit of its bit with the CGT-MSE scheme and the ELCGS scheme. The CGT-MSE scheme, for instance, tells that any MSME can get up to 2 crores of funding without collateral, and that is part of the trust given by the government. But if you see the utilization numbers for this financial year, for the last financial year, it was around, I think, 31,000 crores, which was down from 45,000 crores the previous year. So the government needs to work more closely with the banks and enhance this process. Coming on to, so this was the environment in which we are in. We are, of course, most of the MSMEs are going to be capital starved because of the reasons I mentioned. If you look at the polymer sector, they say that the research and development spend is around 1%. If you look at the MSMEs, it would probably be in decimal points. There are around 50,000 MSMEs in the polymer sector in India. And having spoken to the entire spectrum of the value chain, right from OEMs, ODMs, processing companies, end user companies, FMCG companies, if I was to look at the entire value chain and spectrum, you see that the MSMEs have the least amount of innovation. Why does this happen? I think because a lot of them, make in India, but do not conceptualize or try to develop in India. And I think that is very key. The thought process needs to change. The companies, it's the companies' onus on themselves to decide, that they need to increase their budgetary spend towards innovation, towards, putting in a lot of thought process and manpower into it. And once you decide that, you need to increase your spend towards a new product, towards a new innovation, have a budgetary allocation, have the right rewards and recognition, build an organization culture that supports innovation. I think that is very key. The other thing that I see is the few opportunities or a few themes which I feel MSMEs need to focus on. One is the regulatory changes. Innovation happens, when either you see there's a huge change in regulation, or there is a change in consumer behavior, or you get it on by process changes. If you see on the regulatory landscape in the chemical and the petrochemical sector, there is a huge shift towards phasing out of single-use plastics, bringing in the extended producer responsibility. So this will open up a huge array of opportunities for processors to look into biopolymers, for instance. A lot of the commodities that we work on, for packaging would eventually get replaced by bio-based solutions, and that's going to be a huge opportunity. Similarly, if you were to look at consumer trends, even now, even in India and definitely overseas, you see that there is a huge demand for products which are sustainable. Now, PET bottle recycling, for instance, has been a huge success in India. You rarely would see a PET bottle lying around. And that's because the entire value chain is something which I feel Indian companies have innovated very well, right from picking up of the bottle, right to making the recycled flakes, to polyester-based products. And now you see companies and startups which are even getting into recycled textiles or even shoes to do that. So all this has been possible because of change in consumer behavior, which is demanding sustainable products. The other innovation, which I think is very key for MSMEs, and this comes based on my discussion that I've had with leading OEMs and MNC companies, is that the reliance of Industry 4.0. A lot of SME companies feel that, okay, we have put in an ERP, and that's probably the max that we can go. But robotics, artificial intelligence, getting all your production-related data on the cloud is so important. I have seen a few customers of ours who, get all their quality data and CTQs, critical to quality parameters for their injection molded products on the cloud and share it with their customers. And that gives them an immense amount of confidence to the customers that each production batch is running successfully and very competently. So I think that these are some things, there is a lot of things that government needs to do, but there are a lot of things that are within the hands of the MSMEs. Part, I think that, the network or the nexus between education institutions, government institutions such as CPET, DGFT, etc., and the industry, they need to come together and enhance the spend towards research. On the government side, the government does encourage large industries in big ways, such as the productivity-linked incentive schemes, and that goes a big way towards promoting large industries. Government should come up with schemes whereby they encourage MSMEs to invest in R&D, invest in innovative products by giving them tax breaks, by giving them extended depreciation, by giving them some kind of rebates. And I feel that will go a long way in furthering the progress towards innovation. This apart, we have seen that in countries like China, where you have clusters, manufacturing a particular product, be it molds, be it toys, be it stationery. I think the cluster concept is missing in India. And once government encourages the cluster concept, the government is already getting the PCPIR schemes in a very big way in India. But I think the traction of MSMEs in those clusters needs to increase manifold. And once that happens, we will see a huge change. So these are some of my views on how companies can innovate. And to answer your point, on being capital starved, I think it's upon the MSMEs to think a little differently, to probably also start evaluating being asset light. We have seen a lot of large companies, trying to be asset light, cooperating with other companies, trying to use leasing solutions and all that. And the onus is on us to take up all these benefits, and that the government and the new age finance companies are coming on, be asset light and invest in innovation.